another layer of disrespect. Anger simmered within the prison walls, where the organization's leaders felt their power and authority had been publicly undermined by Hollywood. They believed Olmos had exploited their history for profit while simultaneously dishonoring their name. This wasn't just a movie, it was a public challenge. The response was not a letter to the editor or a bad review. It was a chilling verdict delivered from the shadows, a promise that this perceived insult would not go unanswered. The anger that festered behind bars was about to spill onto the streets with terrifying force. The backlash was swift and deadly. Shortly after the film's release, a wave of violence was unleashed against those associated with its creation. Annalise Zaraga, a former gang member who served as a consultant on the film to ensure its authenticity, was gunned down in her driveway in front of her young son. She was one of 3 consultants murdered in what law enforcement and insiders widely believe were acts of retaliation ordered by the Mexican mafia. The message was clear and brutal: cooperation with outsiders, especially in a way that brought shame to the organization, was a capital offense. The killing sent a shockwave through Hollywood, a stark and terrifying intrusion of prison politics into the world of entertainment. These weren't random acts of violence. They were targeted executions, a demonstration of Laim's long reach and its absolute refusal to be disrespected. The red and blue lights of police cars at crime scenes replaced the bright lights of movie premieres, and the suspense was no longer confined to the screen. The very realism the film had strived for had now manifested in the most horrific way possible, as the fictional violence of the movie gave way to real-world murder and retaliation. This tragic outcome was not entirely unforeseen. Actor Danny Trejo, whose own life story includes years spent in the California prison system and direct experience with the Mexican mafia, had been involved in the film's early stages. He recognized the danger immediately. Trejo warned Edward James Olmos that certain scenes, particularly the depiction of the leader's sexual assault, would be seen as a grave insult and would undoubtedly provoke a violent response from Laim. He understood their code, their emphasis on machismo, and their intolerance for any perceived weakness or disrespect. His warnings, born from first-hand knowledge of a world Olmos only knew as a storyteller, were allegedly dismissed. Trejo, sensing the impending danger and believing the production was crossing a line from which there was no return, chose to walk away from the project. His premonition proved tragically accurate. The refusal to heed his warning highlights a cultural chasm between the storytellers of Hollywood and the real-life subjects of their stories, a disconnect that, in this case, had fatal consequences. The tension that Trejo predicted became a grim reality, leaving a trail of bodies and a chilling lesson in its wake. What was meant to be a story exposing gang brutality became a story of real-life danger. American Me stands as a chilling monument to the moment when fiction collided with a deadly reality, a stark example of what happens when the unwritten rules of the underworld are broken. Hollywood, in its quest for a gritty and authentic narrative, profoundly underestimated the power, reach, and unyielding code of the Mexican mafia. The organization's response was not a plot point to be resolved in a third act. It was a permanent and bloody stain on the film's legacy. The empty prison corridors and shadowy cell blocks depicted on screen became a metaphor for the silent, looming threat that had been awakened. The film's creators wanted to show the consequences of life of violence, but they never imagined they would become part of the story themselves. The consequences were indeed deadly.